Tuesday, April 24th, 2017. And if we could bow our heads for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. If we could all stand for the pledge of allegiance. Commissioner Barron, can you lead us in that?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we need a motion to approve the agenda as set, or a motion to modify the agenda.
Modify the agenda by moving the hotel incentive to old business for discussion and questions.
And I would also like to make a move to hold a fiscal policy guidelines and table that. I had some questions and I promised I would get with Heather. I didn't. So that was on me. But I'd also like to pull number 2 and number 3, and I would like to put them, quite frankly, before our public hearing, because I've got just one question on each document, and I don't think it would need to have Heather here to answer 2 questions. Wait until new business, so we can put it right after the consent agenda before the public hearing has to do that for items 2 and 3.
And you've heard the modifications. We need a motion to approve those modifications, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? There are none. Next, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda as indicated with the adjustment.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? There are none. Thank you. We'll move right into what we've indicated. We have on our consent agenda the minutes from the regular meeting. We have the financial report, which we moved, approved the lease adjustment policy, which we moved off the authorized memorandum of participation for other post-employment benefits, and we're going to table, we have tabled to approve the fiscal policy guidelines. So we're going to hear from the financial report.
Yeah, on the financial report, a figure struck me as odd, and I thought it was worthy of discussion, or at least asking for clarification. But in our general fund expenditures, the debt service capital outlay figure is at 219% of our budget. So if you could help understand how that figure is so apparently out of shape.
Right. So I had allocated some of the funds to pay our debt service within each department budget that was purchasing items this current fiscal year. So I actually need to move those funds from where I've allocated it in the department budget to the debt service. And we're totally covered. We're fine. I just need to reallocate the funds.
Okay, so
and I can do that within the 10% that the town manager is able to move between departments.
So this isn't more debt service, it's just being...
It's just where I had allocated the funds to pay the debt service.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The other question I had on the leak policy, when we compare it to, I think everything is in order, but the one change that I noticed was the original leak policy that we thought about long and hard some years ago established eligibility for somebody who had a leak at a rate that's 50% over their average bill. So So if you've got 1 month that you get a leak and the water's running and you don't know it, and it exceeds 50% of, or 150% of your average yearly bill, then you were qualified for an adjustment. The new policy says you have to be double your average. And so I noticed that as a change, and I know that we're trying to be really considerate of folks who find themselves in a hard space or place when they have a leak undetected and unknown to them until they get their water bill. And so I don't know if this board wants to make the adjustment to have those who qualify double or stick with the 150%. For me, I would like to stick with the 150%.
I missed that item. And can you repeat again, the proposed change is?
To be eligible for an adjustment for a leak, the amount of overage of your average bill over 12 months would have to be double that amount. And what we said,
Currently, we're practicing 150%.
Yeah. So 150% instead of 200%. So my recommendation is that we leave the document as amended, but from the first line to be eligible, it says utility bill to be adjusted to at least double. I would return that back to 1.5 times the average.
I have just one question. I know this has been several years in the making, but exactly where did we get the 25% that is after you get your average and then multiply by 25%? Where did we get that 25% number from? Just to refresh my memory.
I'm not sure where that 25% came from when they originally did the adjustment. But that 25%. So what you do is we calculate the average over 12 months of a customer's bill.
Right.
We subtract that average from their high. We multiply that difference by 25%. We add that to their average bill.
Right.
And then the difference is what we actually do the adjustment for. So it gives a 25% buffer to the adjustment. And so we actually give our calculation is very lenient for our customers. A lot of municipalities the customer still has to pay for all the water that is used. They only do an adjustment either on the sewer portion, or you can pay at the lowest rate of the tier, of our tiers, but you still end up paying because obviously the town is paying to treat that water that got leaked out. So we do a bigger adjustment that a lot of municipalities will do because we take 75% of that difference and essentially write that off for the customer.
And I recall at the time there were several really, I guess we were being very compassionate about the hardships of several people.
Right.
Well, at the time it was pretty hard on one family.
Mm-hmm.
And we were being compassionate, is the way I describe it.
The previous policy too was generated as was the policy that you have before you this evening was generated mainly from looking at other policies in other communities, and then probably adding a little bit to it. Our policy that you're contemplating tonight, notwithstanding your earlier comments, Commissioner Fielko is still looking at double the utility bill that would be at least double the average bill for preceding 12-month period, which is, as the finance director said, is very lenient compared to other communities. I just want to point out we're not trying to shortchange the community by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, we're trying to be as lenient or more lenient than many other communities.
Well, and the policy also says that this is a one-time adjustment per year.
Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of municipalities, they will let you do one adjustment every 2 years.
And I think what also has to be pointed out with this is that oftentimes, and I know you guys might get this type of feedback from water and sewer customers, is that oftentimes people just flat out fall behind on their bills. And that's not what this policy contemplates. We do allow for payment plans in some situations to be made on a case-by-case basis. We try to be as fair with that as possible. But this is to address the use of, there being an unknown problem within their hardware. And can you fix that problem? And if you fix the problem, then yes, you're eligible for this adjustment. But it's not intended to be. If you recall back in the history of when the policy was originally developed, we've had kind of a procession of people coming to either my office or to our town board meetings and saying, "Can we adjust this?" And we would talk about it for 45 minutes during the evening. That's kind of where we started developing this policy.
Well,
what you have before you this evening is really kind of an effort to fine-tune the existing policy that we have and make it consistent, I guess, a little bit more consistent with some of the other policies, at least in terms of readability and how it presents itself, and then also to kind of better define what we arrived at. And was, I think, at the time, kind of probably for my taste, kind of a hasty solution to a problem that we had.
Thinking about your suggestion, Mr. Fiocco, I'm trying to think about circumstances in metered services where I've exceeded my average by 50%, and I think that will probably tend to happen just naturally more often than 100% exceed or a 200% overage. So I'm inclined to go with staff's recommendation on 200%, and heartened by Heather Meacham's suggestion that this is already an awful lot of effort that's been put into making this lenient. But what are others' thoughts on exceedances? I mean, to make my point again, I think it's possible just with natural usage, have a bunch of in-laws in for a month, increase your bill by 50%.
Not that you have to prove. You have to have there's certain it can't just be that you use more water. There's certain criteria that you have to meet.
You have to provide the bills for the repairs that were made.
Okay.
And the idea is that there have been people in the community who were blindsided by people that are living on fixed income. It's difficult to do something like what's happened. It's everything. And the idea was to protect people so that we're in the service business, not we need to make money, but we don't want to create, we don't want to profit from somebody else's hardship.
Especially if they're already undergoing costs of repairs or...
Not just for people that are filling up their swimming pools or watering their yard. You have to prove that there was a need. So it doesn't account for a running toilet.
In fact, the policy excludes specifically filling up your swimming pool.
It has additional requirements, plumbers enforce, receipt for repair, parts, and other proof that the repair has actually been made. And then the information using a lot of water, a lot of times that's covered also in that. So basically, there are somewhat strict requirements, and I think what we were trying to do, sure that's what we were trying to do, was to sort of help people which were on that fixed income. If they could not pay the bill, try to help them out.
Well, in that case, I'd have to defer to others with more experience and recollection of what those kind of anecdote experiences, what their exceedances were.
I'm not going to say that we are still relative to some of the surrounding counties. there are a lot of people who don't have enough income that they aren't in Durham County and Wake County. So to me, we can't really compare our policy to their policy yet, because I think that we have lower, our population tends to be lower income than our neighbors. So I don't know, this might be something more to look at as residents, I guess.
Other comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the policy modifying the double charge to 1.5 times charge.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving forward with our public hearing, we need a motion to go into public hearing, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Jones, we begin with the annexation request for East Cornwallis Street.
Mayor Pro Tem, Board, what we have tonight is a public hearing request to annex along East Cornwallis Street, 3.75 acres of land. The property is adjacent to the town limits. No,
Sure, Michael.
other way. Where we at? As you can see, there's the property there. A good majority of this property is already in the town limits, and the fronting piece along East Cornwallis was excluded from the town limits for some time, and now the property owner wishes to subdivide the property in the future and potentially have an allocation of sewer and water. And this is a step in that process to have that property annexed into town. So I would ask that you hold the public hearing tonight to hear from the public, and if you have any questions for them.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We have one individual who has signed up for that.
Okay.
And that is Pete Runbeck.
Hello, this is my first time here. I live on 385 Winsong Drive, and when you look to the left, that's where this new area is going to be developed. The only concern I have is that the road there, the little cul-de-sac area there, just before you get to the state portion on the left, that something's done for water runoff and something to be brought more into the city, pavement of concrete or something there. Because right now it's just pulverized rocks and concrete as far as I'm concerned. In the summertime it all whips up into dust. So my concern is to, when he does get this property, the sewer, the water, and everything, somebody look at the road there to the front of the place, that I would have to look from my house to the left. That's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant wants to speak.
Mike, do you have any questions, any comments?
I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure that I can necessarily add anything. This is part of that area of Cornwallis that's kind of a donut hole and surrounded on all sides by town property. So I think it would probably behoove the town to bring that into its limits as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
Is this Mr. Dash, is this a voluntary annexation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess I have this one question to the manager. On this annexation, can we proceed to do what we need to do to get that road paved? If this is annexed, I mean, what do we need to move in that direction? It's been a concern of mine for a while.
Others have brought that up before in the past.
Yeah, if this annexes any of the properties in question, then that certainly helps. There still would need to be some involvement with the property owners, exactly how much right of way. But it's not really an issue for me at the end of the day if we have the state paving the road. So if we have the state paving the road and it's not a local road, then the annexation issue is really the biggest hurdle to getting that paved. It's really connecting with the property owners to kind of sign off on the right of way that would have to be necessary in order to pave the road. So if we took
according to this diagram, that the property on the left going down to Cornwallis belongs to the town, and then the next property is Mr. Dasher, correct?
I don't know. The unpaved portion of East Cornwallis is currently under state maintenance control.
Right.
So the state could go ahead and pave that if, as long as the property owners, they wanted to have, the last conversation that I had with DOT on that was they wanted to have some conversations with the property owners that would be affected by that on the width of the right of way. The state could go ahead and pave that without the town actually having to worry about the annexation issues. We're kind of started talking about this at one of the last few board meetings. So we don't really need long story short, we don't really need the annexation issue to get resolved before the state can go ahead and pave it.
What about the town going ahead and pave it?
If
it's a state road, I understand that.
Yeah, if we took maintenance control of that street, which just by annexing it wouldn't necessarily give us maintenance control of that street. DOT would still have to sign over the maintenance control of that street. You would have to accept it. So we don't have the authority to go ahead and pave it right now until the state actually provides us with that authority. So that could be an alternate. That could be like a plan B. We could go that route and then go ahead and pave it, but then we would also be paying for it. If as of right now, even without annexing it, we could go ahead and have DOT pay for it. But again, they want to connect. And even if we paid for it, either way, the property owners still have to be involved, apparently, in a conversation about how much right-of-way would be necessary in order to pave it. So, and that's kind of what we're working on right now.
Okay.
So, we get it paved either way. How about that?
Sounds good.
I'd rather have DOT pay for it.
Right.
If I had my.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Just not particular about waiting in their time schedules, not.
Yeah, I hear you guys, the property owners love it.
Is there public water in Cornwallis?
I'm not sure where the water is in that area. It's on Clark Main a little bit.
Yeah,
Is it
it's on the,
in the Pocket neighborhood?
yeah, there's water running on the southern side of the
Okay. So there's already water and sewer in the roadway.
Yeah.
Any additional comments, questions? If not, we'll move to the next public hearing, which is Windstar Property at 887, at Highway 87.
This is annexation request A201703. Windstar Properties has proposed the annexation of 0.82 acres along the Highway NC Highway 87 bypass. The parcel is adjacent to the current town limits. This is a small portion of a 14-acre subdivision, which is soon to come before the board. Windstar Properties has proposed the annexation so that the entire subdivision will be located within the town limits.
the applicant here? Would you like to speak? Comments from the board, questions? Thank you. If there are no comments and questions, then we'll go on to the next public hearing. Set that for the next agenda. The next one is rezoning request for 57 Camp Drive.
Chatham County has proposed to rezone 57 Camp Drive from R10, High Density Residential, to ONI, Office and Institutional. This parcel is approximately 0.65 acres. It was previously zoned R12 in the late 1980s. It was rezoned to R10 prior to 2004. The future land use plan. The future land use plan has designated this property for a traditional neighborhood, and the surrounding properties are zoned R10 to the north and to the west, while the properties to the south and to the east are zoned ONI. This proposal is consistent with the future land use plan, and staff finds this property to be in a suitable location for office and institutional, as it is surrounded by compatible uses and positioned between properties currently zoned for high-density residential and ONI. Staff recommends that following the public hearing, the request be sent to Planning Board for recommendation.
Thank you. We have one individual which is signed up to speak on that, Ms. Caroline Best. If you would come forward, please.
Good evening. I just have a couple of questions. It said specifically the reason for rezoning, if I'm correct, was for a parking lot. Is that what everybody else reads in that? I'm sorry, I must have misread it. Do you know? I think it said parking lot specifically. It is for a parking lot. So does that mean that is specifically what's going to go up there? Boom, a parking lot. Or can that be changed at any time to anything that someone wants?
It can be changed after the rezoning for what this plan isn't what they're deciding, what they will be deciding.
So putting down that it's specifically for a parking lot, really, there was no reason for that?
Rezoning is based on uses, and so the commissioners, when they decide, they will look at all the uses in the ONI district.
And they just chose that one to put in there to apply under for the parking lot?
I guess it's their
Is that-
intention. The county.
I'll be glad to speak. My name is Brian Stevens. I'm with Chatham County. Our intent is to potentially, our first bet is to remove the abandoned house that's on the property. That was one of the big tickets as far as for us, is to get rid of that abandoned house for one thing. The second piece was that, yes, we are intent on trying to put a parking lot there with no more than 10 spaces. That's our expectation once we get rid of the house, as long as we move forward in that direction. We have no plans to put any type of structure there. We have no any plan. I mean, the location of the property in conjunction with the pool next door. And one of the reasons we're having it done O&I as well is it goes in conjunction with the property we have across the street, our social services facility and the food pantry across the street.
Right, with the two, it's on two sides is residential.
I understand that.
And there are different requirements, obviously, for buffers and so on. And for instance, there's a big oak tree there that you can't even take 3 adults to reach around. So I'm assuming that's going to be destroyed. Or is there a plan in the town that would preserve our old trees?
We haven't looked at the trees specifically right now. I mean, I said right. The first bet was that if we can't get it rezoned, we can't put a parking lot there. And O&I would allow us to put a parking lot there. Our tenant won't.
And what's the setback from the property lines that exists for the residential areas? Perhaps it's different from what ONI.
We're not going to go into
Yeah, I mean, that part I'm not sure, but I wouldn't say, based upon your question in terms of what we intend to put there, that is our own
this would be something I would ask at a later date?
I mean, I'm sure with the town, I mean,
You can come speak to the plan.
yeah, I would say that would be.
You were there earlier today, you can come back and speak to us, and
Let me address that, okay? All right, here's what will happen. This will be sent to the planning board for recommendation, and when it goes to the planning board, we'll have the opportunity to discuss it at that particular point. And also, there will be specifics indicated from Chatham County, which they will indicate what they are requesting specifically. If your concern is about the trees, the landscaping, things such as that, you can bring that to their attention at that particular point. But we can't have the one-on-one exchange at a public hearing like
Yes.
this.
Well, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
I am curious, and if she's found that out, it is a beautiful tree, and if it is a parking lot, that's something that you all consider working around.
I mean, it's entirely possible. I mean, like I said, we're not looking at, we're going to be doing 10 spaces or less based upon the guidelines that we're able to work within on that piece of property based upon the constraints that are there for what we're looking for. And this is, it's just an opportunity. I mean, the facility over at Social Services and the food pantry get kind of tight at times, especially during the summertime when the pool's in work, you know, in full function. And it was just a means for us to have an additional piece of parking there. That's also going to be the fact that the triple wide trailer that's out in front of Social Services is also going to be come back into use, and it allows us that much more parking, which, like I said, it's up to 10 spaces, so it's not a tremendous impact on that site as a little over half-acre lot. So there's certainly potential that we can look to work around a tree. That's not, like I said, that's nothing that we've actually considered at this point, because we wanted to approach this piece first to find out if we could even get it rezoned to move forward in the first place. So the part of the big ticket, like I said, for us was the fact that there's an abandoned house that's on the property that is an issue for us as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Beth. Thank you.
A couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
Sure. It appears as though access to the property is through an easement that is on the adjoining property. Is it the intent to continue to use that easement or access to this parcel?
As best of my knowledge, there hasn't been anything put forward that I'm aware of to change any of that.
If in fact you do a parking lot, is it planned to be lighted?
Doubtful at this time. It kind of depends on how things shake out as far as how we move forward, and if we actually do end up doing it, and if that's what we, once it's there, we kind of foresee what the location looks like, and if it is a dark location that does need lighting, then we'll probably approach Duke Energy for their area lighting like we have in the rest of the parking lot.
10 spaces, that's not many.
No, it's not.
And I think the county owns all the remaining property other than the residential section.
I don't believe we are actually owning. Do we own the property where the pool sits right now? I don't believe that's still owned by a different group. It's a private pool portion. So the adjacent property actually right beside it is still owned by a different owner. I think Pool Association, or I can't recall what who's listed as the owner on that property, but it's not a county. It's just. I'm not sure what the
This is owned by the pool and swimming.
Yeah, the swimming association, everything's up, yes. Well, actually, there's actually, it's kind of this is actually all by the pool association. This is the pool in question. This is Chatham County. This is part of the property of the county. And it's just a portion across the street that we're looking to take care of once the house is back here. But that puts it in line with the same zoning that we have on our property that we do across the parking lot.
Any further questions?
Yes, just to confirm that part of the motivation here would be to add parking that might be utilized by visitors to the pool?
Not to the pool.
No.
No, this is for the county side of the property. I mean, this is for the county function of the property. The pool is not a part of the county. The pool is a private entity that runs their stuff. That's what this property actually is used for. This is all their parking area that they use on this side of the property. This is just going to be used to give us a little bit of
just
Yeah, it is.
parking in there?
Well, we haven't been using this facility we've got right here. We're getting ready to put people back in there, and the increased parking is going to be needed. That piece, along with what already goes on the social services property, along with the food pantry up here, which has got very limited parking. We just figured this would be a good opportunity to take some advantage of a piece of property we haven't owned and get some use out of it. It's a limited use.
And you say that you will be looking at the tree?
We certainly can. Like I said, it just hasn't been brought up in question, so I'm not saying, we're not looking to go in there and bulldoze it to the limits of the property. So I mean, the more we do with that, the more it costs us as well. And if we're only putting 10 parking places in there, we really need to kind of be frugal in terms of how we go and approach the clearing and putting in the parking lot as well. So it's to our benefit not to necessarily do more than we have to.
Sure. That's all my questions.
Any additional questions, comments? So basically, you're indicating that you're not necessarily going to push down all the trees.
No, I mean, I said the more we do, the more it costs us.
Yes, it will.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's, we'll go in and set the limits based upon what the requirements are. Set as far as the town's concerned, should we do the zoning, and we'll meet those requirements, and then the setbacks that we put on us, and we'll deal with that as well. So.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Victoria, okay. Victoria.
Yes, you.
One more?
No, Victoria.
Okay.
You don't have to leave, though.
I mean, I'm just making sure.
Help explain the rationale that this is consistent with future land use plan.
If you look in the packet that we gave you, it lists the definition for traditional neighborhood. And in traditional neighborhood, it describes it as existing neighborhoods in Pittsburgh that are primarily residential, but also include a mix of other uses. A mix of other uses, and further down it lists business/mixed-use buildings. What else are mixed? Other use.
I don't think it's in the packet, that definition. But
It's not, sorry. On the back of the staff announcement.
I have read our land use plan, and it seemed to focus on this idea of mixed-use buildings. And I thought a parking lot isn't, in my mind, a mixed-use building.
Can't think of it as a parking lot.
Oh, well, I know that.
You know,
I know that.
we need to get away from
However,
that.
when the applicant said, we want to put a parking lot there.
We can't change their application.
I understand that. But putting a parking lot, I'm surprised that there are folks from the residential area that are joining this property here tonight, and that speaks for itself.
We never received a call, so.
Okay.
I put one at y'all's desk tonight.
Ms. Amy Roberts?
I would like.
So I guess if we don't know what the use is, and we're just replacing a neighborhood traditional area with an O&I district, all those uses in O&I, then it becomes consistent with the traditional neighborhood designation. And I don't know if that's the case.
That's why we're here for public hearing.
Right. Yep.
No, that's all right. I think you just kind of answered some question in terms of where he's at with that, so that's fine. My piece was just that a big piece of this puzzle for us was also the location of the abandoned house and being able to address that as well. It's not just the thought process of putting in it's the better service piece of property as well. It's not just necessarily just the fact that we're looking somewhere for a parking lot.
Yeah, it's just that the poor folks want to use some of their property.
Well, like I said, when they're open during the summer, I mean, it's like, and it's just one of those things. There's not enough parking. That's part of the issue that we're facing, and it does get that bad in the summertime over there.
have one other comment, and that is from the public, from Amy Roberts, and she indicated, which I'm going to read a portion of that for the record, that, and this is from her, I quote, "I am mostly concerned that our property values will decrease by changing the zoning from residential to offices and institutional buildings. The traffic will increase exponentially, so the craziness in the morning and afternoon will be even worse, not to mention the ill effect on the environment and wildlife by destroying more of the surrounding woods. As for me personally, I choose the location of my home site in this development because it was relatively secluded, peaceful, and less traffic. The proposed zoning changes will erase all of the above." And she indicates, "I am not in favor of the zoning change for these reasons." And she said, "Thank you for your time, sincerely, Amy Roberts." And that is to be put into the minutes as well, and we have it. So we have no other comments, concerns. This will conclude our public hearing. So we need a motion.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we'll go forward with our regular meeting of this agenda, citizen matters. We have two citizens which are signed up to speak. First, we'll hear from Ms. Pam Falk. If you will come forward, please. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for hearing me tonight. I'm Pam Falk with Carolina Tiger Rescue, and I want to speak just for a minute to the need to have some kind of hotel accommodations in this community. We have, as a byproduct of our educational services, our educational tours, we have over 19,000 people visit annually. That is not counting people who come for spring break work projects or many of the other types of volunteers that we have. That is just visitors for our tours. So of 19,000 people, 33% of those are from more than an hour and a half away from Pittsboro. We have people from, this year so far, 48 states, and we have an average of 18 foreign countries. Those people need somewhere to stay. We have 2 beds and breakfasts that are for sale. So as you can imagine, people go to Chapel Hill, they go to Siler City, they go somewhere else, not here. 33%, that's over 6,000 people who don't have anywhere to stay here. Even if you divide those into couples and families, you're still talking over 800 people annually who could have been served in this county had we an opportunity. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that we would certainly be someone who would be making referrals if we had somewhere to refer people. And I hope you'll consider that in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Did you have any questions? Sorry.
No, not at this time. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Next, we'll have our former mayor, Randy Bowler.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin. We all hope that Mayor Perry is doing well after surgery. As someone who's visited the Carolina Tiger Preserve and CPT before, it is a great place. I'm just here tonight as a follow-up from the last meeting, and I brought the potential owners of the Pittsboro Fish Company to get this going. We've been working there tonight in town at the old post office, and just wanted to address the board as the chair of the Main Street Committee, subcommittee on revitalization downtown, some ideas just so the board could think about this. These guys are real excited to come to Pittsboro. In fact, I was over there today, and they're actually sanding the floors down themselves. So they're doing everything they can to kind of bootstrap up. And, you know, in talking with them and interviewing them about this, they're very excited to come here. It's been their dream to run their own establishment, and they have over 50 years of experience in the business, roughly 25 years apiece as chefs. They believe this new establishment will employ 15 people with a gross revenue of $800,000 to $1 million a year, which obviously the town and county would get a piece of for in terms of sales tax revenue. They're working with local vendors. Taylor Hobbs actually is the gentleman doing all the design work. Their budget is roughly $200,000 for improvement and $120,000 for equipment, tables, etc., which is normally called FF&E. That might sound a little low, but part of it is they're doing a lot of kind of the work themselves up front that they can do to get in there. They plan on being open most of the week, except for Mondays. I don't know if any of you guys were able to go to that event at City Tap where they had all the oysters, but it was an incredibly well-attended event, and most people that have been talking to them are excited to know that we would be getting another restaurant here that would actually specialize in fish. Their major stumbling block, and really this is not blaming the town, it's just a fact, is the fee structure that we have in place as it relates to people coming into these businesses or buildings changing over. The state code puts forth a figure of roughly 40 gallons per seat. This is nothing that Pittsboro does. It comes straight down from Diener. So if you have a 100-seat restaurant, it's about 4,000 gallons per day that the state is going to say that you're going to need. And you can see by the letter that they prepared that those type of fees are looking at roughly in total $70,000. For a small business or for any type of entrepreneurs, and in this budget it's about 22%, it's pretty cost prohibitive. And we all know that these fees were meant to capture capital investment that the town has made in our infrastructure. We all know what our intent to put them together and what they're supposed to do. But I don't think it's reasonable, and these guys feel the same, that we would make it difficult to get into some of these downtown buildings, especially because if you're going into a building that already had a restaurant, like you changed over, you probably wouldn't be subject to these fees. So we're already, by having the policy we do, you might be directing young entrepreneurs to particular buildings on the uses it currently has and avoiding others. And I think that this post office has been vacant for many, many years. I think it would be the intent for the town to want people to get into that post office. I asked them to look into and talk to other businesses in town about the type of water use that they were doing. So Steve Carr and Seth Wood from City Tap were one of a few folks that were kind enough to directly share. And they use 377 gallons per day, which, they have paper plate service, it's a bar, it's a different kind of restaurant. But I think it's indicative or illustrative that the fees that the state dictates are probably not really in line with what the realistic use, when someone is in there. And I think the town might want to consider how the policy can be tweaked or adjusted. I know that, and Mike can probably speak to this, in the past, we had looked at another policy for the downtown that might have to do with water meter size or something else that, would be fair to everyone and be, would enable the town to extract a fee that was paying back for the investment of the citizens, but also not be prohibitive so that you can't actually get folks to come in here and bootstrap into these businesses. I think it's always been the intent of the town to get owner-occupied types of businesses. This is not a chain. And in order to do that, I think we have to, especially in the Main Street area, we might want to be more creative in our thinking. So I asked them to come in here tonight to meet you and answer any questions you may have. So this is Bill and James. And that's pretty much the summation of what I told you guys I'd come back after last meeting and after a little more research.
Well, I think in the Main Street area, we're definitely interested in seeing old buildings being repurposed. And I think anything we can do to incentivize that is, and it can be partners with the community that's going to develop and open businesses that I think we want to do. In the past, There have been occasions where there were no fees charged for a business. And Mr. Messick and I were working on a policy some years ago, and part of the thinking was based on a water meter size, because that's an indicator of how much water and sewer you're going to need to use. And if you can go into an old building, let's say it was an office building, you don't need to increase the meter size, but you're modifying the use, then there would be no additional fee, even if your gallons were to increase, because the capacity is there. The office conceivably could use that water and send it to the sewer treatment plant. So that's part of the thinking, and I think anything we can do to develop a policy that encourages adaptive reuse of these old buildings, I think is positive, because there are so many other economic benefits on the other side of that.
We also have supporting, as you say, businesses that aren't chain, but small businesses, and the character of our town. And I'm thrilled to have, people are very excited about the I love that, and people to another part of the downtown area. It used to be a vibrant part of Pittsburgh, and it's nice to think it will be that way again.
So, Mr. Messick, maybe we can dust off the policy. Okay. See where we left it.
I'll just share that I feel very similarly to what Commissioner Foley and Commissioner Fiocco have been expressing. I would like to think of this in terms of a policy rather than an exception.
Right.
And I think that there's a real strong need for that, because I feel that, I think we all feel concerned for our downtown and how the growth outside of the core of town will affect the prospects of businesses downtown. And I think the more investment of blood, sweat, tears, and funds that we can get, such as this effort, in the downtown area, is going to increase activity, increase interest, increase vibrancy. And so I have been thinking in terms of what can we do to think about an overlay, but maybe that's overly complicating the situation. But I mean, I think if we can think in terms of geography of downtown, the geography of the area that we really want to see increase in density, increase in investment, increase in utilization, infill development, for example, not just redevelopment of older buildings. That'd be something I'd like to get on board.
Any additional comments, questions? But I will say I'm glad to see you all in Pittsburgh. Thank you so very much. And basically for revitalizing the old post office, that was much needed, and we look forward to being here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin. And if you guys will tell them where you're currently been chefing, they probably know the places.
Well, Bill and I had moved up here from South Carolina, and until last June, we were both chefs at the Carolina Inn in Chapel Hill. And so it had been our dream. We had worked together for about 9 years over the past. And we've had a lot of talk over the years about having our own restaurant. We're very excited about it, and we're very excited to be here at Pittsburgh. We are excited about being downtown and really love the space, and we knew that Pittsburgh was going to grow, but we wanted to have a unique feel for our restaurant and not an outside of town or strip mall type look to us. And so we wanted to have that feel, and so we're really excited to be there. And thank you very much for everyone to speak about.
Such a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to Commissioner Fiocco and Mr. Messick working on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
don't have anyone else which is signed up for public expression at this time. So let's see if we can do a commissioner update. I don't have any updates, other than I will say that I will be attending the Triangle J Council Government meeting on Wednesday at 7. So then I will report back to the board after that. So does anyone else have any updates?
Well, I just mentioned the Main Street program. One of the items on our consent agenda was the closing of Hillsborough Street for the Summerfest. And one of the things that Summerfest did last year was it had a specific area where beer was served. And they would like to expand that, but we have an ordinance in place that would prevent that. And so I wanted to suggest to the board that maybe we could modify our ordinance to provide for special occasions and special permits to expand on that. If the board was willing to ask the Chief Crutchfield and Mr. Messick and Mr. Grudbeck, if you could, work on an ordinance modification. Right. Ms. Boyd, sorry if you'd like to participate. Let's get the whole team on board. And really, maybe Maria could communicate with you on what she has in mind for the rest of it.
So would we be looking to end up with a policy that's non-fortified alcohol, just beer, wine, mead, cider?
I'll leave it. That would be my expectation.
No liquor.
Yeah, I don't even know that ABC rules would allow the local ordinance to allow that. I'll ask Maria to reach out and to kickstart it.
If I may, probably best for us to look at what best practices other communities are using too.
Yeah.
It's not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, North Carolina's full of these breweries, and they're set up to do mobile kind of events.
Yeah, but there are also ABC restrictions, which which we can either look up or reach out to. But there's so many. It's a moving target, so I don't want to.
I have a question regarding that. Are you opening this up for business to serve alcohol to the sidewalks, streets, and all that also?
I was thinking
not just a street, but not just a vendor that's in a trailer or a truck. Just asking a question. Yeah. Fair for one, fair for all.
I was thinking for special events, but if you'd like to expand that to
special event that day, does it not include business owners there now?
Oh, I think it could.
I would say so.
Yeah, I would imagine we need to.
Streets closed, right?
And and there's more than one business that would be interested, I believe.
Certainly, okay.
Yeah.
Certainly the bars.
We go into old business. John. Site easement tradition, David Street project.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the board. This is a continuation of discussion that you had at your last meeting. This is to, the developer has placed a request to the town to remove a condition of off-site easement acquisition on adjacent piece of property that is across the street from the proposed, the approved development. And during the last meeting, we heard from Mrs. Farrell, who's the property owner, And there was some discussion as to having her and the developer in the town do some additional discussion before we got back to you all tonight. During that time, Mrs. Farrell has reached out to the town and has indicated that she does not need or want an easement on her property, and that she would no longer otherwise be opposed to the project. So the request from the developer would be to remove that easement acquisition condition. I have further clarification from this board as to does this board still want the work on that drainage way to be performed by someone? Because I kind of got that from the discussion last time. We may be okay getting rid of the easement, but there's still an issue, and is somebody going to fix that issue? So what I've got in the approval notice that met with the development was to require an easement and also do all the work, which is indicated on 3 and 4 year provide documentation of the all-site easement that has been obtained, and then the swell on the east side of Davies Street must be approved by the town prior to the issuance of construction plan set. Is it the desire of the board to remove one or both, or either or none of these kind of conditions? That's for your discussion tonight. And the applicant is here.
Well, I think all that work would occur in the right of way, so that wouldn't be on Ms. Farrell's property. It's my understanding that not only does she not want easement, she doesn't want any easements.
Yeah, I actually tried to call her today, didn't get a return call. And the last time I did talk to her, she was pretty much, did not want to have an easement and was pretty much leave her property as is. If you've been by there lately, this swale that we're talking about on that property is pretty much what she's got right now. It's not a ditch, it's a little small swale that it's probably not even 8 inches deep. I went by there again this afternoon during one of our hard rainstorms. And personally myself, I would just leave it like it is, so I'd want it to spread out even worse than it is. But that's what her did. But she did not return the call.
So I had the impression that there was currently maybe not a flooding issue, but getting in that direction, that maybe really hard rain, that it might flood. And
they find out tomorrow.
And then for that reason, the notion on this board was that ought to be a welcome improvement, but am I hearing that she doesn't want that? She doesn't want those changes made, a swale to be installed?
Pretty much.
And this is her opportunity.
That's what, like I said, I tried to call today.
And Mr. Jones, do you have any insight in that direction?
As to her desire on the actual work being done, I haven't spoken to her personally. Mr. Brucebeck maybe have to indicate that.
What's been said previously? I spoke to her the day after the meeting, the day after the last meeting that was discussed, and she indicated that she didn't want an easement on her property.
And what about the work or swell or improvements? That wasn't mentioned.
She said she didn't need it, and otherwise wouldn't be opposed to the project moving forward.
She wouldn't be opposed to removing these conditions.
So basically, there would be no drainage issues at all right now.
Well, the developer is still going to be maintaining drainage on his property, so its current state will not be, it will stay in its current state. So there will be a stormwater device that takes care of the water and then filters it through. That's my understanding.
One question, we would, developer would have to have some type of construction easement or anything to get on her property.
That's correct. If there was anything that needed to be done on her side of the property outside of the right of way, there needs to be some sort of temporary easement.
That's pretty much what I thought. She didn't want no easement. Is that correct, Ryan?
Correct.
Yeah.
So she definitely does not want any improvements made. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd make a motion that we adopt the resolution to remove those two conditions from site plan approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There are none. Thank you. Next, we'll move forward with the hotel incentives, which was removed from the consent agenda.
Did we have, are we in old business right now?
Do you want to?
Yes.
You want to do Chatham Park and then?
Well, I think I can be brief on hotel incentives.
Okay.
Just simply to say that I'll feel comfortable scheduling a hearing once we have the commitments in writing. And I think we probably ought to decide which of the several incentive structures we would prefer before we put it to the public hearing. That's my own opinion.
The memo on February 27th outlined a number of draft commitments. So do we need something in writing apart from these, or?
Yeah, I'd like to add the two items that I've put in writing.
Could you remind me what those two items were?
Sure. That we ask the developer to achieve LEED certification, and that we also ask, excuse me, as regards, what's the language here?
Using local skills.
Yeah, employment. Similar to number one, but in terms of during construction rather than during operation, effort will be made to the extent practicable, to hire local skilled trades, local contractors and subcontractors.
So if whether we hold the public hearing on May 22nd, or whether we discuss this in another meeting in this fashion, if I took this memo, updated it to include a comment about LEED certification or LEED construction, and then added a sentence to number one, would you need to see that before you schedule the public hearing, or could we simply agree to do that and schedule a public hearing for May 22nd?
Well, I think we also have to decide what kind of structure we're going to have.
I think we can hold the public hearing, though, before we decide.
There's a significant difference between the structures to the incentive, with significant financial implications.
Right.
You think people should have input about which one to do? Is that your suggestion?
Is that your suggestion? Public should get input on which of the three?
It would be part of the information of the public hearing, I suspect.
Kind of part of the purpose of the public hearing, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I would have thought we would refine the decision, refine the options before putting it to public. But
yeah, and I think that's a great suggestion, and I think that's absolutely what we should do and have that information there for the public to react to.
I think we want public input on which level of reimbursement, if any, or incentive, if any, that the public desires.
Now, for your train of thought, that's how we usually do it. We make the decisions and then we run it by the public. I see what you're saying.
So what's the wishes of the board? Do we want to set public hearing? Or discuss things in the forum? Do we want to set the public hearing for May 22nd?
It seems to me, I think you raised a very interesting point. If we still go ahead and have the public hearing, then it needs to be very clear what options are, so that the public understands that they're commenting not only on hotel incentives, but specifically which one needs to be very, very clearly outlined.
I think Brian put together 3, 4, 5 different options.
Right.
And quite frankly, we could.
I think that should be part of the announcement of the public hearing, if that's going to be the case.
I think it would.
Yeah.
And I think, quite frankly, we could, based on what we hear from the public, could modify it. Could create a whole new one. So I know we've been talking about getting back to this issue, and it seems to keep kicking on down the road. I'm comfortable moving forward with the public hearing on the 22nd.
Still have a small bill either way.
The wishes of the board.
I'd just like to see the commitments that I suggested in writing. I haven't heard anything against it from my fellow board members. I'd like to see this in writing. So
you would like a proposal or a letter from the developer of the hotel that they will do these things, they commit to them?
Or it could be the same as Mr. Grusbeck's memo provides.
And I can tell you, as I indicated in my email as I indicated on February 27th, and then later in my email, that, I can tell you right now that, and we can certainly have ECO partners elaborate on this whenever we wish to discuss it with them next. But LEED certification is probably something that, because we hear this from a lot of builders, and I heard it from the developer himself, that LEED certification is probably something that they wouldn't be pursuing. They would be constructing the building to LEED standards, but wouldn't be going through the process and cost of achieving the LEED certification. So it would have all the advantages of LEED construction without being certified. And they agreed to do on the hiring of local contractors or local employees, they agreed to make it. They agreed to work towards that point, but they weren't, at least initially, agreeable to making it a condition of commitments. So I don't know if that helps or hinders decision making at this point, but that's what we would be looking at in a future conversation. So, yeah, I don't know that any of that's new information except for maybe to Mr. Bonnets, but it's there now, and it's certainly there for future discussion as well.
I spoke with Mr. Kirkbride today and got a similar understanding from him, Mr. Grusbeck, that echoed your points. He agreed, though, that the work that they're planning to do will in all likelihood meet LEED certification, they simply would not be pursuing the certification.
That's what I said.
Yes, sir. I think it's worth emphasizing. And so, my concern is that as I hear from constituents regarding their lack of support for an incentive for a hotel or their opposition to a hotel, I also hear sentiments that something like LEED certification is the kind of branding, it's the kind of symbolism that this town takes pride in its leadership in energy and environmental design, which is what the acronym stands for. And this is why I would like the topic to be continued in the conversation. And if it gets to the point where ECO CP LLC is unable to perform the project with full LEED certification, but they are striving for a building that might meet it without the actual label, then I think that this board can contemplate that at that time. But I think that it needs to remain in the conversation, and I think we need to strive for exceptional buildings, especially in something as symbolic and welcoming as a hotel. Folks that I've heard from, it's really important that if we do this, that it's something that really represents the community. So, that's why, in my mind, the labor elements and the environmental elements are so important to the people in this community and to the people's sentiments regarding the environment. Yes? Setting precedent. Setting a precedent and a symbol that's an actual gateway to our community. People who will be coming to visit Chatham Park will be staying at this hotel, not just people who are coming to visit the old downtown. And so the symbolism is really important. This is a little bit wonky, this LEED certification, so I just want to make sure everybody on the board understands it. That LEED is kind of a branding thing that a third party grants after one goes through a long list, a checklist basically. So that the building gets designed according to certain standards for literally leadership in environmental performance and energy performance, energy efficiency, the indoor air quality, things like that. And a building can be built to a similar checklist to that and not get that final brand. I want to make sure that the board understands that. But the distinction is bragging points, basically. It's bragging rights. If you get LEED Silver or LEED Gold or LEED Platinum, then that is something that can be put into advertising, or actually it is put on the front of the building as a plaque. So it's a distinction. It's a distinction that basically says a disinterested third party has gone through this list and agreed, yes, this project meets all of these criteria. It does what it says it did. But a developer can build without that third party certification. And the building may perform beautifully.
That sounds like not knocking that, but that sounds like a large expense to the contractor. Because you're adding a third party in here to come in and do this checklist. And if you got a confidence in your builder and contractor that he's going to push forward for this LEED, is it necessary to be LEED certified? I'm just saying, I don't know all the details on this, but that's just, I just think that's another added expense to the contractor.
I think
whether
that's,
he is or not, I don't know.
Well, I think if Habitat for Humanity can build a LEED certified house, why not a local hotel?
I think those are both absolutely valid points, Commissioner Foley and Commissioner Farrell. And indeed, that's what the developer spoke to me about today, is in his estimation it's a 20% premium. But I've been studying this subject since 1999 and worked on it briefly in that industry for a couple of years. And my understanding is that the national organization that promotes this standard says that on average it's only a 4% price premium. So, you know, the difference there is because some folks are really good at it and some folks aren't. And if you're not good at something, it's going to cost a lot more. You're not as practiced at it. Don't have as much the tools built in. So, you know, it may be a learning curve here. And it may not be practical. But I think that it's something that we ought to continue keeping in the discussion. And I would hope that it's something that we continue to ask the developers to strive for.
Do we have any LEED certified hotels in this area, out of curiosity?
Greensboro, Charlotte, Raleigh. Greensboro, Charlotte, and Raleigh.
How about the one right up here that's being built on 501 between Chapel Hill?
I don't think so. I hadn't heard about it. But
So Chapel Hill didn't have LEED certified hotel? That's unusual, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Just curious.
Well, I'm familiar with some of the LEED program, and the big complaint is that certification at the end of it. And many developers want the LEED, they want the types of buildings that LEED produces. And they go through the checklist with our engineers and their architects, and they determine what level LEED they are. They just don't go through that additional expense at the back end that certifies it, and as you said, for bragging rights.
Yeah.
And it is more than bragging rights, but to some degree it is simply for bragging rights, because if you build a building that performs exactly the same, it doesn't have a plaque on it, you're getting the environmental benefits that you want. Yeah. So I don't know what they were thinking was when they say they're going to do LEED but not get it certified, that they would fill out the form. I've been involved in a couple of LEED projects. Yes, it's tough.
Certification just to make sure you make
Right.
Now, a portion of that is related to the performance of a building. And we've got a great example here in town on Pittsboro Elementary School Road. The Raffi building was designed by a LEED certified architect. And she applied the criteria in designing that building. They did not, in the end, seek the stamp, the LEED seal. And I'm going to be speaking out of turn here a little bit because this is uninformed, but only informed by my experience in working in the building for 5 years. I think that the result is that the building doesn't perform. And Kathy Zomsile, I think, would be happy to speak to any of us about it. The building HVAC has been troublesome and problematic. It was a complex undertaking. And when you take on something new and different, individual offices with individual controls for heating and air, that makes things complicated. And part of my understanding of part of the LEED certification is something called commissioning, which requires that an engineer run through the systems before the building is occupied, proving that indeed it's going to work. And then part of that is even when the early occupation of the building and use of the building begins, you're still proving that it's going to work. Because all of these systems, they're very complicated in new buildings that are highly energy efficient. And getting them lined up to work properly so that they actually deliver on the energy savings that they promise, that's not a given for the architectural and construction process. This is why LEED certification remains a positive thing, a good thing, something to strive for. It's because it gives the investors in that building or the owner of that building the assurance that it's going to perform as designed. is way more than I intended for us to chat about the subject, but I'm glad we had the opportunity to, because I really do believe that it's something very important.
Well, I think there are other standards other than LEED.
There absolutely are.
Right.
Yeah, and just commissioning, straight up building commissioning is another option on the table for the developer. Energy Star.
Green Building Council.
That's USGBC has the LEED certification. I'm not sure what there are for commercial buildings, but I'm sure that there's other options out there. And I know Energy Star is one.
I'll make a motion that we have a public hearing on the 22nd with the modifications to the memo that John recommended.
I guess I'd say LEED certification needs to be more open to the, what's the word? Green certification, what's the word? Or specifically that we use the word again?
I do.
Okay.
There's been a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next we'll go to Chatham Park. Chatham Park Master Plan text.
Yeah, so this is a continuation of a discussion that we started a month ago on the first four elements for phasing, signage, parking, and loading, and lighting. These elements have been a part of two public hearings. One was on March 27th, which was the last time we talked about Chatham Park, and then again on December 12th, 2016. The appointed Additional Elements Committee considered these elements. They reported to you all in December with their recommendations. The Planning Board additionally gave comments to you all and the developer. Staff gave comments to the developer and you all, and the developer has responded to those comments in text form. Those were shared with you all and Planning Board. And what we saw at the last time we talked about this in March were edited elements that had both red line edits and final versions of these particular elements. So for you all, what the discussion is tonight is, has those elements as edited satisfied the comments that you all have received to date? And do you have additional thoughts on these elements that you would like to ask the applicant? And once you get to a point that you are comfortable with those responses, and it could be tonight or it could be a subsequent meeting, the resolution that was included in your packet is the mechanism of how we would go about approving these elements and future elements that the town would consider. The applicant is here, staff is here, including town manager, town attorney, and we can answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Questions from the board? Mr. Jones, Mr. Jalper?
No, I think I expressed my comments and concerns at the last meeting. So. I haven't seen anything in response.
Okay. So there was at the last meeting, I think there was some comments that were made. I remember it was a little confusing last time we had a public hearing on two sets of elements. One was the open space tree protection, landscaping, and stormwater. Those sets of elements have yet to go to planning board for final recommendations. Those potentially could go next week to planning board. As I understood it, that these elements that are before you again tonight were refined to a point that Chatham Park was comfortable to move forward with these proposals to you all. If there are pointed questions that you want or concerns that you want Chatham Park to address, I think maybe a rehashing of those might be might be appropriate tonight. And again, this is up for consideration for tonight, but you all can contemplate this to a future date if necessary. So I think it might be appropriate if you all have, if you've read through the edits of these particular elements and you still don't see or didn't see anything that you thought might change, we need to have that discussion tonight.
And the elements you're referring to are the ones we reviewed at the last meeting, because there were no new elements of this.
That's right. So it's phasing, and this was the elements that had the red lines, and then the final clean version, you would say, would be phasing, signage, parking and loading, and lighting.
So I was confused, Mr. Jones, about whether or not we are contemplating the general provisions at this point.
Not at this point.
Okay.
We'll go back to planning board with those next time as well.
Okay.
I think, Mr. Jones, of concern is this statement in here where it says the town of Pittsboro will not be able to amend these elements without the consent of the developer or future developers of the town park. If you could provide
That's in my staff report.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could provide an explanation in reference to why that cannot be done.
Yeah.
Is there any ordinances in the future which Commissioner, he may not be here, would say, okay, this would be better for Shannon Park than town.
Right. So the town attorney's going to have to help me out on this a little bit, but it is my understanding that once signage is approved for Chatham Park, that the element on signage would govern all aspects of signage within the Chatham Park boundaries. If there are particular parts of the UDO that signage does not address for whatever particular reason, that the UDO would be a secondary regulation that would apply. But if there is something where we say signage adjacent to residential properties can only be illuminated between 12 and 6 p.m. or 12 and some regulation where there's a time limit on that. But the Chatham Park element speaks to that type of regulation. Chatham Park's regulation would be the regulation that would hold true to that question. We would not be able to come back at a later time and say, well, we don't like that unilaterally. We don't like that. And we need for you to stop illuminating your signs between 2 and 5 p.m. or something. Just throwing out times there. We would need to work with the developer to have them to consent to that change. That's my understanding. And again, I would look to the town attorney to be able to give us some clarification on that explanation for you.
With respect to signage, ask me if that's accurate. There may be other elements or other parts of other elements that are treated differently than that. The master plan talked about it at the very beginning. That's something you all approved, 3 years ago now. That it basically said that the master plan, the additional elements, and the development agreement all sort of have to work together, and that depending on what the nature of the regulation is in a particular element, it may be that future ordinances or future standards from the state with respect to the building code, with respect to, I think, erosion control and stormwater might be effective in Chatham Park. Things that were established in the master plan with regard to development standards, those can't be used without the consent of the developer. So it's not really a very straight answer, but it depends on what element or what regulation you're talking about, whether or not future changes either require the consent of the developer or don't. So, but I think with respect to signage, I think it's pretty clear that that's true. That whatever you all approve for Chatham Park is the law in Chatham Park, as far as signage is concerned. And maybe even some of the others are similar. But there are going to be some that are different too. I hope that helps.
That helps. But what I was trying to get at is that, say perhaps none of us are on the board years later, and someone may arbitrarily decide that this is not what they desire for that particular area, Chatham Park, because it has been out of approximately 30 to 40 years. So what I'm trying to say is, how is it that it's not going, someone can just arbitrarily change these elements to meet a particular ordinance, which may have changed for them?
Well, hopefully nobody that is elected to your positions will do anything that's arbitrary. But if you have a good reason, or your successors have good reasons, then hopefully they will request the developer to consent to some change. If somebody tries to pass a law and somebody else doesn't think they're entitled to pass the law, then we have ways to address those issues. But I don't know that you can preclude that conversation 30 years from now. I mean, you all were not here when most of the ordinances that are in place now were adopted.
But I just wanted to be clear for the record as to what the reasons for that.
Okay. Well, the reasons are that you're making a special arrangement with Chatham Park. The very nature of the planned development district and the creature that you have helped to create allows for this sort of certainty. And it is an expectation on the developer's part that they know what the rules are and that the rules can't arbitrarily change out from underneath it. Same sort of, the flip side of that is that you have some certainty to know what it is that they're going to do as well. So the certainty outweighs the possibility of arbitrariness on either party's part. So you all have considered that to be a benefit to the town in allowing this to go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
For what it's worth.
Thank you. Any additional questions, comments, concerns?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin, I appreciate you asking that question and eliciting this conversation. Those provisions early in the document do concern me. We're not specifically addressing the general provisions tonight, but it's an important umbrella to conduct this conversation under, because each of these additional elements is going to be putting in stone, essentially, what's described kind of as an ordinance for that particular subject matter, signage, as the example we're talking about. And the most succinct concern that I have heard from a constituent has been that the additional elements taken as a whole are not specific enough and not detailed enough that we can consent to that being the rule for perpetuity. Now that's a great sweeping statement, but that's the most succinct and most compelling concern that I've heard so far, is that we are sacrificing a tremendous amount of authority for a level of detail that isn't satisfying.
But to the extent that you approve any element, there has to be a text that is satisfactory to the town and satisfactory to Chatham Park. If you don't think the current text is detailed enough, then it's incumbent on you to suggest what detail you would like to see in it.
Well, and there have been comments from the public that weren't addressed in the responses from Chatham Park.
Well, I think it needs to come from you, the board. You've heard from the public. Now the question is, what do you want?
Very good.
And if you want more detail, then you need to tell them that. But I think you need to be as specific as possible so that they can address what your concerns are. probably need a process to figure out how to do that.
Additional comments?
And at the very least, there is a text that has gone through some revision and some modifications and so forth, that has come back from Chatham Park with their edits and their changes. You know, you all have that. If you think that there is a deficiency in any part of that, then it seems to me that it's incumbent on you to bring that forward somehow in some process, either individually or collectively, or be more efficient to be collective than individual, but somehow you all need to respond to whatever you think is deficient. And probably the sooner the better, because you've got others coming down the pipe.
So I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I found this to be a very daunting process. An awful lot of input, an awful lot to read through, and it's been a real challenge, as this is a part-time endeavor, to try to even begin to compile my own thoughts and reactions, trying to be mindful of those of constituents as well. I'm searching. I'm just searching. I just wish that we had more assistance. I don't know if it's something akin to the UDO process, but the Additional Elements Review Committee was helpful for me. I sat in on those meetings. I think I got every single one of them, attended every single one of them. And yet, even there were comments that came out of that process that weren't addressed. So, if they were addressed basically as, thank you, but we're not going to do that. So it's just daunting. It's just daunting. It's an awful lot of work.
John, I think that's a legitimate response, that, no, we're not going to do that. And if you feel strongly about it, then I think basically you should say to them, no, I want you to do that. But I think we do, at the end of the day, and we have a public hearing, we have staff comments, we hear things out on the street, and it's up to us to process that information and push back or push forward what it is we want to develop for. And it does require an agreement. Without an agreement, we don't have anything. And so it is up to us to be very specific about what did we hear from the public that we think is important for the community. And it is. It's very difficult to process all that information. But at the end of the day, we have to do that. It's up to us. We will speak for the people. Well, I know that last time you were feeling like you didn't have enough time to process. Are you feeling so still?
I'm still feeling that. Yeah. Even with all the reading that I've done and efforts to compile notes. Maybe it's because I've been CC'd on every single one of the comments. I don't know, but maybe others didn't receive all the comments.
Why could you not take the last draft, mark it up with either, corrections that you think are things in there that you don't like or don't think are accurate, and if you have other issues that you think need to be addressed, then at least attach them or make a note or something, so that you all have not had any feedback at all from you in public. I don't know what you've done in private, but you haven't announced any public feedback with any of this stuff. We've heard from your committees that you've used to advise you, but you haven't come back with anything.
Well, I disagree with that, because I think like the 2 meetings prior, I had a pretty lengthy list.
Okay.
And I reviewed it on videotape or via audio today to make sure that my notes were accurate. So, no, I'm looking, I've put forth my edits and my suggestions.
Well, here's what I suggest. If there are those type of concerns, then you need to, as Mr. Messick indicated, you need to go through it, indicate what those concerns are, chapter by chapter, page by page, and then we have to present that to Chatham Park. Because there's no way that they're going to have an idea of what we're interested in receiving or what we would like for them to do without them actually getting that feedback from us in writing. So if everyone has concerns, then certainly we need to address that to them. So
Well, that
they
brings to mind, if you're presenting as an individual, then are there things that we as a board feel are really worth standing for? Different departments, individual suggestions to say that we as a board stand for this.
Well, at the end of the day, through our collective input, that we will voice as a board.
that if an individual has an individual concern, we as boards will review that concern as well. And then if that is one that the board can agree is a legitimate problem or request, then as a board, just let Chatham Park know.
Surely we are interpreting all of the public input differently, through different filters, and so we are diverse, and individually we can discuss our interpretations, but as a board, ultimately it will be those items that will stand the test.
So what does the board do? Do you think we need to have a work session? What do you all think? Or what?
I really think it is up to us individually to process the information and to make recommendations to the developer. I think we owe that to them. I think as folks trying to do business in Pittsboro, we have to perform as well as we expect them to perform.
I agree, Michael. I agree. And I feel very much responsible for that. And I also think that maybe a workshop or a session, which we could all meet, hash these things out, could be a helpful tool for me to work towards that goal. I also am mindful that this is the implications are very, very significant and far-reaching. And that's one of the concerns is I don't think we have sufficient definition on how long is this? Is this in perpetuity, truly? Or is this just through the expected build-out, 20 years? Is there a lifespan on the additional elements? Is there any point at which in the future things like signage responsibility will return to this board, this elected board, for those 7,000 acres?
Messick answered that. When he asked, from our understanding from what he was saying, if there is something later on in the future, maybe not, none of us may be here, that would be something that the individual Chatham Park and this board could discuss with each other. If there's a situation where there needs to be something more change. Because you just don't know. So, but as a board, we still have the authority to discuss something with those owners. Because we still have that, and always will have that.
And Reston is over 50 years old. And the regulations that were established more than 50 years ago, I don't know them, and I'm sure they've been amended on numerous occasions. But there are probably a significant amount of the regulations on day one that are still applicable. And that's what we're looking at. If
requires both entities to agree on the original regulations and any amendments they do. And it's similar to what we've already done in Powell Place. You know, those regulations apply to Powell Place until the town and Powell Place agree to amend it. We've done this before, or the town has done this before.
What's the wish of the board?
Commissioner Sherrill, I'm curious what's going on over there.
I'm more confused than I ever was now. And I'm just glad we started with these 4 elements here and not open space and affordable housing. You know, I feel fairly comfortable with what our committee and our staff have gone through. And I've read the emails. Miss Leah's right there. I've read hers also. She's made several really good comments. But, you know, I don't have the answer. I really don't. I feel like these 4 are adequate. I'm maybe a little more than adequate. Maybe we should move on with these. I'm not, you know, I understand where you're coming from.
Commissioner Foley, could you elaborate a little bit more on the idea that you offered about a session?
I'm just reflecting what I'm hearing, that I want everybody on the board to feel good about the document. It's a very important document, and it's to work on a creative, stronger document, and I'm in favor of doing what we need to do.
I just want it to be done the correct way. If there's additional information, as I said, we need to let Chatham Park know, we need to go on and let them know specifically what our concerns are. And if there's anything we need to add, we need to let them know, or we wish to add.
Yeah.
We need to let them know what it is specifically that concerns us.
So let me give you another snapshot of one of the things that's weighing on me the hardest is phasing of it. Because in many ways it defers to the small area plan and further other approval processes with a level of detail that I think we really need to conduct the kind of planning we need to build firehouses and site police substations and participate with the county in their school planning process. And I'm hearing from numerous sectors that phasing element is inadequate to that task. I'm not a planner, but I have yet to hear it is adequate.
But why are they saying it's inadequate?
Well, that's my point.
Why are they saying that?
This is why I say I'm searching, Commissioner Baldwin. I don't have the answer to that. But if I hear resounding that something is inadequate, then I would seek to have professionals help us with that. And in the case of affordable housing, I think we've all agreed we really want that committee from the county to give us feedback. We've heard from the Additional Elements Review Committee that they believe Chatham Park needs to go out and hire some professional help. That makes my heart beat faster and happier. Because if they hire the professional assistants to give us greater definition in something that has been broadly received as being inadequate, then perhaps we'll come up with something that is adequate.
The housing down the road, but I mean specifically these here.
Yes.
What are they saying are inadequate about the phasing?
And what I'm hearing is that it's categorically inadequate. It doesn't give us the tools that we need to plan with police department and staffing and the level of detail that we really need.
John mentioned what I said a couple meetings ago about that.
I think what you're looking for will be addressed in the adequate public facilities section, which is, talks about police, schools, fire, restaurants, and rec, town administrative facilities. So I think that's where that rubber's going to hit the road. When something happens, when is a police station, when is, staff of an increase that warrants some new infrastructure. I think that combined with the development agreement is the place where those matters really are addressed. And I know the phasing, you want to have more on it, but I think what we're saying is we're going to do this big chunk first. We're going to do this big chunk second. And in that big chunk, all kinds of infrastructure is going to be discussed. And I think the public facilities and the development agreement are a place where we can really nail down. I don't think it needs to be in there. I don't. So I'll offer that as some insight or input.
No comment about that.
Yeah. And, yeah.
I just don't have the basis to judge it. So,
What do you need to get that basis done? Let me ask you that.
Well, I think that I've said before, and we'll say again, that having outside professional assistance and evaluating all of this input would be invaluable. I mean, just priceless. Now that's my optimal. That's my ideal. If we can't come to an agreement on an expenditure for such consulting services, then I would say let's drop back and punt and set a date and do a workshop, and I will inform the wife and buckle down and lock myself away and get this done.
Additional comments that you think the outside consultant? What does the board think?
Personally ready to move forward. I will obviously attend and participate in a workshop. More than happy to do that.
Participate in a workshop.
My strong feelings about some of the ones that are coming up. I think they're all important. But
We're going to do a workshop. I'd like to do it within the next 2 weeks.
I just think we need to get moving. There's a way to do it. You need to move it quickly. That's how they can start out. I thought like how much money to pay.
I don't think we need to move consultant because they're going to take weeks and weeks and read and all this. And we just went through a review committee and our staff and everything else. And I'm kind of like Michael. I don't have any other comments regarding these phases right here, these elements.
Well, I do have some problems.
Yeah, I mean, there's things, there's nothing that
2
needs
weeks
to be
ago.
changed in detail.
A month ago.
I think it wouldn't hurt to get together as a board and to go over everyone's concerns, and then we just think, do everybody.
And you think during the work session, John Park would be in attendance to answer questions? Making that kind of workshop?
I don't have any objection to this attending. I think we ought to have a conversation ourselves.
Collaboration, instead of slowing things down, have to keep things up.
The workshop.
That's fine with me.
So,
Ms. Cruiser, we're trying to do considering a workshop within the next
2 weeks, hopefully.
That's prior to our next board meeting, prior to the 8th. Yeah. Yeah, that's, yeah, I'm going to be out for a while.
Would it help if you guys just tell me right now if you can think what days you might not be available in the next 2 weeks? Maybe one more.
I hate to say this, but I don't believe I can do a single daytime. So I'd have to do an evening.
Yeah.
We say right now what we can and can't do, or something else that you know.
Would Thursday evenings work?
ABC board meeting. That only goes till about 6:30. What about Tuesday, May 2nd?
Well, we have the 5 and 15 rule, so we're not holding anybody back. Obviously, we don't want to delay this effort, but how about the 11th? Would you be the 18th as well?
Yeah, that's why I said hopefully we can get next week. Tuesday, 2nd doesn't work for you?
No, I didn't say that. How late do you work? Okay. Can we talk about Thursday before?
What about like next week after like 9 to 10?
Wednesday the 3rd?
There's a Main Street meeting as well.
So who's in the second weekend, I think?
May 2nd.
Tuesday.
Tuesday, May 2nd.
And is there a particular time in the evening that works?
How would you like to do it?
Yeah. Okay. All right, Tuesday, May 2nd, 6:30 to...
Until we're finished.
Well, fellow commissioners, I thank you. I appreciate this. I feel a sense of relief, and look forward to it.
Have that? May
Yeah.
2nd.
Yeah, May 2nd.
6:30.
6:30. Mr. Jones?
I'm unfortunately not going to be able to be there. I'm going to have to figure something out, but I'll be the only child care provider in my home that week. My wife will be in California, so
All right.
we'll figure something out.
Bring the kids.
He's 6. You wouldn't want him here. The 10-year-old would be fine, but he's going with his mom. I'll figure something out.
We'll get a reminder out, and if anybody has any issues, let us know as soon as possible. We'll work on something else.
Very good.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the manager updates on projects.
Okay. Well, you have my memo, so I won't go into a lot of detail other than you guys just talked about a work session, and Commissioner Fiocco brought up an interesting point in that he will not be here on May 8th for the meeting. And on that meeting, we were, I think as you recall from our discussion in the last meeting, we were talking about spending some time in work session for the reclamation facility and other related financial issues to force main. So given that Mayor Perry is also going to be absent from that meeting, do you want to continue forward with that type of a work session, or do we want to postpone that conversation to a later date? I assume that the work session you just scheduled, given that we're starting it at 6:30, you're not going to have any time or energy to really do anything else other than discuss those additional elements. So,
I think we should focus on the additional elements.
Yeah.
okay.
I will be back for our meeting on the 22nd. So, just going to start on the 8th.
Okay. Let me see how that affects the budget. I was kind of idealizing the May 22nd as a public hearing for the budget. But if I could do that first meeting in June, if I could push that back to the first meeting in June, that's probably still technically. I just want to double check that I still have enough time to get that done. But that might be the best possible option.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the budget and seeing all the money we're going to save in the police department budget with that county.
That's your can.
Your drug sniffing cat.
It takes a long time for the asset forfeitures to come in.
Maybe some licensing revenues too from that.
By the way, well done.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
You had me for a good 10 seconds.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. It was fun.
So other than that, I would just I would close it out. Probably I'll go back. I'll update you on what we want to do about that workshop and what we want to do about the public hearing as far as the budget goes. As far as the overall budget, that's shaping up nicely. I think there's some. I'm cautiously optimistic on a lot of fronts. So it's a lot easier to budget when you have good news on the horizon, as far as projects and development and things like that, than it is the alternatives. So that does make life a little bit easier. So the only other thing that I would also mention off script a little bit is that you'll recall last week we anticipated replacing a valve for Powell Place neighborhood. That decision was made on looking at a leaking valve for a number of days. We exercised the valve after noticing that what we thought was a leak. When we exercised it and basically let water run through it at the fullest rate, shut it off when everything dried up, we didn't notice a leak anymore. which sometimes happens when, when water goes through it. Sometimes it sometimes provides more moisture and more sealing ability for the valves and the O-ring and so forth. And so we're cautiously optimistic that we don't have to replace it at this time. So we went ahead and made the decision at that point in time not to drop a shovel into the pavement and cause everyone to lose water service for a period of time. So we'll keep an eye on it. If something changes, then we'll go back in. But as of right now, I think we're going to take a cautious approach and that was kind of the fun and games for last week. With that, I will close out and open for any questions.
Brian, can I make one update to the board? So at your desk, or at your seats tonight is the small area plan, the physical impact analysis, and the design guidelines. Those have been posted on the town's website. You all have your hard copies. Alice has hard copies for the front town hall and for her. Maybe these answer some questions that you want to see in the elements. So take a look at those. And if you want a presentation or something, we can do that. It was important for us to sort of get through some of the elements and then focus on the small area plan. But I think if you read the small area plan, you might pull nuggets out of that you want to see that applies to all of Chatham Park. So by all means, don't not look at it. It could be helpful in your understanding of Chatham Park.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions? Mr. Bruce back from anyone?
So I received a call about noise ordinance, and I was very pleased to read the update, Mr. Grusbeck, about the UDO. But I don't recall whether or not we have in our existing ordinances or in that UDO anything about noise. Is there anything different in ordinance?
I'm not sure. Currently, zoning doesn't. We don't have anything in the zoning ordinance covering noise. I'm going to have to double check the UDO to make sure that ordinance was brought into the UDO, if that was the desire of the town. I guess we have a standalone noise ordinance now, and if that's something that we want to apply in the UDO, we'll take a look at that. If there's something specific, then I need to know about that too. Yeah, usually there's some things that apply that's not development related. A band downtown, something with Summerfest or something that really wouldn't filter through my office. That would go through somewhere here in town hall, Alice or Brian. But if that's something we can talk about, we can do that. I don't think it's currently in our
We
draft.
updated our noise ordinance some years ago after a lot of work on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an interesting process.
Glad to know that.
We've never, knock on wood, I mean, we don't have, I haven't fielded many complaints on the noise ordinance. I don't know whether that's good or bad.
Any additional questions, Mr. Bruce? Okay, well, we'll move on to commissioner concern. Commissioner Farrell.
I don't have anything, thank you.
Yeah, Brian, just one thing. We had talked about lighting the holly trees, and I was just wondering if we making progress on that. I know you had to get some hardware or something. Just wondering where we stand on that.
Yeah, you and I talked with John about it that one day.
Right. So
I don't remember what we said.
Okay.
That's the last I talked about.
So it's just something that I think we want to do. So
Whenever that, a couple of weeks ago, whenever that was.
A while ago, actually. Just when the kiosk went in, right? Isn't that the day we talked about? Yeah, it's been a while. Well, yeah, I think it really does a lot for the downtown look, so we'd like for us to...
As I recall now, you mentioned it, the issue there is that the lights will grow, the trees will grow around the lights, so we'll have to replace the lights every year. So it's a matter of budgeting for the lights. So what we're kind of doing right now is we have one strand of lights that's currently remaining in the trees, and we're kind of looking to see how the tree acts with those lights over a long period of time. So that's one thing, but even aside from that, we wanted the bare bones solution to all of that is simply to go in there, and it's going to require some expense, but to go in there every year, basically, and just replace the lights, I guess, is the way around that. So if we replace the lights annually, then that's not a problem. So if we want to take that expense, then it's something we can do.
Yeah, I would like to, most definitely. I think it's a really great look for downtown.
Okay, I'll let you know what that is at budget time.
Okay, great. Thanks.
For the next meeting or sometime soon, Mr. Krusbeck, could we get an update on the EV effort in electrical vehicle charging stations?
Have a reimbursement agreement that you can approve anytime.
Okay.
Hasn't really been a priority.
Yeah, I understand. You've got a lot on your plate, but maybe some kind of schedule or something to understand when that would unfold.
We can approve it at the next meeting, probably.
When the projects might develop.
Yeah, I haven't even put out an RFQ for that.
Okay.
Any additional?
That's all.
I don't have any additional concerns. We'll propose to go into closed session. Oh, you want to break first?
Yes, please.
Keep them going, buddy. Would you hide your cat to sniff out drugs or something?
Yeah, I made a little Facebook post saying that we had trains.
Back in the regular session.
Move we reconvene for regular session. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Pursuant to NCGS 143-318-1185 to discuss the purchase of real estate like no closed session. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.